Excellent. Okay, so let's begin with this sixth module, and well, this module and the next one, kind of like they're going to meet each other. Like there's not going to be a fixed beginning and end. It's just, let's say it's two parts to just see this. Okay, this what I'd like to explain. And this is going to probably, well, I guess previously it's been, a lot of things have been kind of different. Jeff, I'm just going to mute your mic. Is that all right?
Yeah, actually, I was trying to do it myself. Yeah, if you
okay.
could, it'd be great.
There, excellent. This is a part that probably for people who are listening to this for the first time is going to be very much new, like very much new. And for the people who have the trauma with numbers, don't worry, it's not so much about mathematics. Well, it's basic mathematics, but the perspective is very different. So yeah, like I said, kind of like this module with the next one is going to kind of merge together, so there's not going to be too much of a separation. And what I want to explain, it's not all that easy to explain this part, so let's kind of see how it goes. But it is definitely a contribution that has emerged with the global convergent logic and space-time structures, which for some people, there's different types of relationships with what I'm going to be explaining with the numbers. Some people, it's like, thank God, somebody is beginning to talk my language, okay? Some people, it's like, it resonates, but it's just like, I can't really get my head around it. And then other people, it's like, what the hell is this? You know, like, what the hell is this? I would say that in my experience, I'll share my experience, it wasn't like immediately natural. It was like learning a different language, we could say. But there was in the background, this resonance with it. But it wasn't, it's like I needed the time to kind of absorb that, let's say, that language. And now more and more, it's becoming a more important part of the way that space-time is informing me, yeah, or is relating with my processing, with my personal processing. So it does have like a stage of like, it's very much like when you're learning a language, you know, the first, it's kind of, wow, it's new, strange, and then you need that time of kind of being in contact with it, and then there's going to be just a natural assimilation, and then there's a moment that you're really beginning to, let's say you're hearing the language and it's making sense, and more, and then there's a moment that even it's like you're even, let's say, you're dreaming in that language. You know that point where probably Laura will know about this. Like you're living in a country and it's not your mother tongue, but there's this moment, of course, you're surrounded by the language and you're absorbing it. And then there's this moment that it actually starts to be the language that's more present than your mother tongue. So you actually dream with it. And okay, but this is, yeah, I would say that not necessarily, I think, for all people, it is a language that they use. But it is interesting to just open up to it, you know, to open up and begin to say, okay, that's interesting, and give it a chance. Let's say, give it a chance, and then each person naturally will use it more or use it less. That all depends on how it kind of works for each person. Yeah? So basically, let me kind of go into it, and it's this that I'm sharing here is just a way of explaining it. Okay, it's just a way of explaining it. It's not like a rigid explanation, but one of the best ways to see it, to look at it, is that, well, space-time and the unfoldments of space-time basically is it's a system of communication in a way. Okay, so when the expression of space-time has this kind of like, if we see the structure of any system of communication, I'm just gonna put this big there. There. No, let me see. I'd like to see you guys. Ooh, just a second. What have I done? Okay, well we'll see. There, excellent. So any system of communication basically has, well, two elements that are very important. It has something that is emitting a signal, or emitting a message, we could say, and something which is kind of receiving that message. Yeah. And what happens is that a lot of times the emitter is using a type of signal that is not all that natural, to the receiver. So what we have in the middle is what we could call like kind of like a translator or a decoder, so that the receiver can process in its own, let's say, in its own language, in its own code, that signal that has been emitted. Okay. So basically, we have been talking about, first of all, let's place ourselves as an individual human cell on this earth, okay? And, well, this is the question that consciously, unconsciously people have to make. It's like, what aspect of life do I consider an emitter for me? So let's say that we are receivers, okay? Of course, everything is a receiver emitter. It's like, it has both qualities. There's nothing that is a pure, receiver or a pure emitter, really. The closest to a pure emitter would be a sun. But at the same time, the sun is receiving from, well, other suns, but also it's receiving from the negative, we could say. So it's like consciously, unconsciously, especially there's one point in our lives that we're saying, like, what do we consider, what do I place as my emitter, And well, a lot of people, for example, consciously, unconsciously, they place their emitter as the past, And so the past is the one that is providing me the signal for me to receive and make sense of the present. Some people, it's their nation, their culture. Yeah. Again, consciously or unconsciously. Some people, maybe it's their own species, the human species. So there is this kind of like question that each of us are placed, because as a receiver, let's say like a radio, it's like where are we placing the dial? Is it called a dial? In Spanish, it's called a dial. Like where are we? Well, the antenna of the radio. So there is something like a bit of a choice there, in a sense, because it's going to change a lot if I place the emitter, let's say, in a certain radio station or another. There's going to be, but all of them are like available at the same time. Yeah. So basically, what we have been doing together is accept it. First of all, the receiver has to accept itself where it is as itself. I can't, like, if I begin to say that, I'm not sure, I am, so the coordinates of the receiver have to be very clear, very clear. If I say, you know, let's put an example. If I say that, well, the personal me, I am the planet, well, it's like, it's not true. You see, that's where this honesty needs to be placed. Like, I have to just see where I am for who I am at this moment in time, at this point, at this place in space. So that's where I have to be well positioned individually as a particle, yeah. Because it's like if we don't know where the radio is, how can we kind of synchronize it? So we have to know where the radio is. That is this kind of, and what do in human words we call this self-acceptance of our position. So if we're trying to fake our position, you know, if we're trying to pretend something that we're not, it's kind of like it's not good. It's like if we're not going to really receive the emission wherever we're placing it because we're not positioned. So this is kind of important, like for the receiver to position itself, and position itself is just kind of like the self-acceptance of where I am. It doesn't matter what margin of error you could be. You just have to kind of like, just kind of describe where you are. Yeah, and there you need that level of honesty, because a lot of people, a lot of humans, what we have done is it's more important to, it's kind of been more important to show an image of where we are than like if it was more like if we're trying to play a role which is not really where we are, you know. So we like faking it in a way. Well. And the first place where we have to be honest is not so much out there, it's inside. It's like, but there we have to see that inside we have created a lot of autoengaño. We have fooled ourselves in a way, yeah, or we lie to ourselves, because there are things that culturally, morally, or whatever it is, self-deception, thanks, Laura, self-deception. So, but we've done that because it's like we don't want to see that, but that's where we lose the coordinates, you see, because that's where we're losing our position. And when we lose the position, we lose the kind of the capturing of the signal. Okay, so basically what we've been doing is, okay, but what emitters? Well, I think one wants to choose or wants to locate an emitter that they feel has integrity, and it has like integrity, and it has a broader vision than my own, So that's where we have been seeing these different levels of emitters. If we go to the you know, the absolute, we could say it's nothing and everything. Okay, everything would be an expressed universe. So that is, it's important to have that very, very broad absolute position. So let's say that basically each of us are connected to nothing and everything, to the consciousness of nothing and everything. That is important to have because it gives us the maximum freedom. But at the same time, it doesn't locate us very well. That's okay. It's good to have it as a, you see, there's two different ways of guiding ourselves in space-time. One is to have an orientation, and one is to have a guide. Okay, what is the difference between an orientation and a guide? Okay, the orientation is always the widest picture. Let's talk about Google Maps. Okay, so I have to know that I'm on planet Earth. Okay, or let's put it a bit more. I have to know which country I'm in. Okay, I have to know I have to have the broad orientation. But then when I want to guide myself, you know, like when I want to go to a certain restaurant and I go to Google Maps, and that is going to be my guide. It's like more specific on the ground. It gives me but if I don't know I'm in Argentina, because the Google Maps is not going to show me that unless I do the zoom out. It's going to go to that. So it's good to have the maximum orientation, but then a kind of a guide in it. So, because if I say nothing, everything, okay, that gives me the broadest kind of emitter possible. But it's a good orientation, but it's not a good guide. It's not a good guide because it's like, okay, well, that includes a lot of stuff, doesn't it? So the guide would be more like, okay, well, probably one would be on a planet, on this global planet, which is connected with this kind of sun, and they make this kind of system called the solar system. That is a better guide to have. Okay, yes, definitely, that is talking with nothing and everything, meaning the consciousness of nothing through the whole universe, through this version of expression of nothingness. So, okay, but that's in the background, yeah. Because when I'm walking to the restaurant, I'm not really thinking of Argentina, but it is definitely in the background. Okay. Now, when we are more kind of positioning ourselves, probably the best guide we have, I think, it gives us kind of like a solid guide, but as an emitter. So it has a solid located guide, but at the same time, it is it has a big integrity of consciousness, which would be planet Earth, okay? So for now, let's put that the emitter is planet Earth, okay? We know that planet Earth at the same time is a receiver of the sun, but let's just focus it on the relationship between Earth and us, okay, for now. So, okay, this is the thing. Emitter. Receptor. It's not really receiver, is it? Is it receiver, emitter, and it's not a receptor, it's a receiver, yeah. Okay, first of all, the receiver. Let's go with the receiver. The receiver it's like our individuality, our particle, like I said before. Yeah? So we definitely know, okay, let's say David, human being, a cell, a human cell of the planet Earth, okay? Now, let's see, the thing is that the emitter here is the Earth consciousness. And the receiver here is, let's just put the particle, the individual particle, the cell or the particle, if we want to put it. Now, do you think that they are managing the same kind of, how can I say this? The same width of communication, or like this has a very big width because it's a global consciousness, okay? So being a global consciousness, and this is, you see, we as receivers aren't a global consciousness. We are a particular consciousness, meaning that we are part of a globe. Okay, so there is a different nature. There's a different nature of consciousness in these two places, all right? So we definitely do need something here, okay, which could do this kind of like decoding or this kind of translation, you know, translating and interpreting, you know, because because it's just different natures of consciousness. It is the same consciousness, but expressed in different natures. So we do need a kind of decoding, all right? Now, do you remember we were speaking the other day, well, as the purpose of humans, what we do know also, which is very important for us to know, is that we are in the membrane of Earth. We're like in the superficie of Earth. So we are not in the middle. We're not in the nucleus. We're the superficie, like. Meaning also that we are also in connection with the what's outside of Earth in the membrane. So that's why we are all, it's very important to understand that we are also very much connected with the sun, for example. We're also like sun antennas for the Earth because we capture in that sun. So sun is also going to be something important. But for now, you see, this is also something about space-time. We have multiple references which we are connected with, but we have to kind of locate which one at each time is the most appropriate one. And I think to explain what I want to explain, it's more, let's establish first this connection with Earth, because it's like the cell in a way has to know which body it's connected to. And there, okay, I can, also have this reception of the outside, but I am communicating to the central nervous system. Yeah. So remember, we had on the superficie, we have an evolution of these antennas. Yeah, the mineral, and the mineral is also definitely receiving this emission from Earth consciousness. So let's just put a drawing, because sometimes the drawing helps us. So say this is the Earth, center of the Earth, equator, okay, kind of like central. And if you see when it does a signal, it's kind of like a Wi-Fi circular kind of thing, etc. So the mineral kingdom is definitely going to be receiving this emission of the Earth, but it's going to be receiving it in its own kind of nature. So the mineral kingdom, it just receives that emission. Let's just say, like, if it was more a direct electrical reception, it's very much pure. And that's why I say that when you receive a kind of emission from the Earth consciousness, the first aspect who's going to receive that is not your human interpreter. No, it's going to be the minerals. It's going to be, when I say also mineral kingdom, I'm talking about non-organic. So I'm also referring to the water, which is not a mineral, it's a mineraloid, but it's all that aspect, the non-organic. That which we say is it's not alive because it's not dead. It can't die, sorry. So normally that's the thing, when you're receiving from Earth, you're really the first ones that are finding out is more the micro world, like it's more the minerals. It's more like the water, and when it receives when you kind of like the waters receive that emission, we have metals, and it's going to establish kind of like an electricity in our cells. Okay, so that is a way of receiving it. It's like an electrical and we also call it like resonance. Something is resonating. See, resonance is not so much, it's like electrical. Now, the first level of translation of that is from mineral. Electrical, I say, because it's, the metals are the best conductors of electricity, and so, and it's like we belong to this nervous system. Now, from that kind of electrical reception, which is not verbal, okay, that's very important. It's not verbal. It's more like sensorial, so electrical. There is a chemical kind of processing of that, which we call that Yeah, like the blood. The blood, you see, is basically water. So the blood is one of those areas that capture that, and also in the blood there's minerals. Yeah. So yeah. So understanding that we are receiving from the earth in levels that are not verbal, that are not let's say that are not verbal, they are not like intellectual, we could say. It's like a pure physical reception. Then that is kind of translated, processed chemically. And that would be like, if we had to put it, that would be going from the mineral to the plant kingdom, okay? Okay, the plant kingdom. This is going from within. The plant kingdom is also from, taken from the sun. So let's just go it from earth to us, okay? And that's, so chemically, that's where that electrical, and let's see if you guys can flavor the difference, that electrical kind of resonance, and then it has more like a chemical, it's like, it's a more a feel there, a feel of a chemistry, yeah? It's more like a chemistry. Then that chemistry is going to kind of translate into a different area, which is more the animal. And what is the animal? It's more like adrenaline. So it's more like something I want, something where I want to move to, something so it's more about an action, not so much about a feeling, it's about an action. So that impulse that is received from the earth through our minerals, which is like this electrical resonance, it is processed into like this chemistry, this feel, okay, this feel, and that feel it brings us this kind of this action, something to do to it, like an action, like an adrenaline kind of action, and then, okay, this is where, and then there is something that begins to kind of put that into words in a way. It starts to be translated and interpreted in human consciousness. And that's where we can begin to become self-conscious. We can translate that into, okay, so for example, I want to go to this event of, let's say, Alejandra. But that first, your minerals were receiving it. Not your, like the last step. The last step is actually you processing it into a verbal kind of, yeah, which is also very important. But what I'm saying is that it comes from the under levels, yeah. So meaning that we have different levels of translation, okay? So we have, like I said, like this electrical, this chemical, this more adrenaline action, and then we have the description, because there's also a human translator, which I call the descriptor. It's an aspect of our human consciousness which is describing what's happening. For example, I noticed that Americans, in my experience, are very good at that. When I speak to them, I notice that they can describe very well kind of what they are going through. It's like they have a good descriptive aspect. So it's not interpreting yet, it's describing what's happening. Just kind of like, when you're describing whatever you're describing. So one thing is to describe, okay, with human consciousness saying, okay, it is, it's cloudy, it's 15 degrees. So it's describing a situation. But then there's a need, there's something that it wants to interpret it and say, okay, so it's a beautiful day, or it's a cold day, or it's a, okay, so, I think it's not that we need to interpret things as humans. What we do have to understand that interpretation is limited, but we do need to, there's something in us that requires an interpretation, at least at one moment. And then we can open that interpretation to a wider one, okay? But you see, that is already kind of like this human consciousness area, which what the difference between the animal and the human is that the human has this aspect of self-reflecting on what they're receiving. That the animal isn't so much like that. The animal receives the signal and moves, okay? It has more like action reaction thing. But the human has this other level in its like another level of software where it can receive that and then it can reflect. And it's very important. It's actually something that it's important for the human to do. This is where the problem comes with the human, that because it can separate from that and it can describe, it can reflect and interpret. One thing is to separate and look at it, and another thing is to dissociate from it. And this is something that humans kind of tend to do sometimes. Like they think that their human interpretation is more important than the rest. It's like if they dissociate from the other levels of translation and they cut that. This is something that happens to a lot of times to academics and intellectuals. It's like they are only translating life through their interpretation and description. But they speak, and you can notice that there's a disconnection there. You know, there's something that is being disconnected because you can't feel that kind of warm adrenaline. You know, you can't feel that chemistry of earth behind it, that electricity. It's just like, and maybe it's beautiful what they're talking about, but there's a level that you can notice a disconnection. And it happens a lot with, like I said, academics. And now the typical thing people do is like, okay, well, they see that is, it is dissociated, so they polarize and they say, okay, the interpreter and the translator of the human is the one that has to be cut out. So the only thing we have to be doing is just kind of like sensing and acting, no interpretation, no translation and all that. And it's like, it's not gonna work either that. You know, okay, maybe you want to do that for a while because you want to reconnect with something you disconnected with, but at some point, something in you is going to want to make sense of what's happening because you are a human. And that's where we have to know where we are. We are humans. And as humans, we have this kind of, we could say, need to make sense of what's happening. Okay? This is not something better or worse. It's just what it is. It's just the role we're playing. So we can't kind of try to regress to animals only and to the, you see, that's not an integral way of seeing it. Now, definitely, I do know why people are in a way are doing that, because there has been an unbalance where we have kind of we've actually seen as inferior the animal, vegetable, and not only is that, we see it like if it's something out there, like the animals are something out there, the minerals are something out there, like if the vegetable is something out there, like if that has nothing to do with our own evolutionary process. You see, that's the dissociation. So another thing with humans is that not only can we reflect, translate, and interpret, we can also what we call administrate. We can administrate an action, okay? So we can administrate in a design action. So, you know, the Earth is sending the signal of going to some place, to some country, or whatever it is, you know, to study whatever, or to speak with a friend, or, you know, to something that you know is an action. But then you are going to, as a human consciousness, is administrate that. Like, just imagine I get the impulse at 3 o'clock in the morning to speak with Jed. Well, I have to understand. I have to, okay, Earth is telling me communicate. So Earth consciousness is telling me communicate with Jeff. Now I have to administrate that. Yeah, I have to see, okay, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Probably he's not going to be very happy if I call him and say, Jeff, I've got the resonance from Earth to speak with you, you know. I have to administrate it. And I have to wait probably for a more ideal, I have to be able to channel that. That's something that a human can do. They can administrate it, they can channel it into a strategic, more kind of communication. Now, so then I'm going to wait until the morning, say, okay, now it's 10 o'clock in the morning in America. I think Jeff should be, so then I speak to him. I take that call with pleasure. I'm not sure. Okay, so we have to, okay, that's something. Now, the numbers are coming, but it's very important for me to give this background, because if not, it's not going to be understood. Another thing, we self-administrate that impulse. This is another thing, the human can't create that impulse. You see, when they're trying to feed, you know, these humans, like, I'm going to try feel inspired for this. You can't do that. That's something that Earth provides to you. The inspiration or the impulse or the, you know, you can't do that. You know, that is, you're manipulating things there. You know, you're not open to receive it, you're manipulating things. So it's like, oh, I want to continue in love with this person. Well, it's really, you can't do that, you know. Maybe you can just wait to see if Earth provides you, you know, with that impulse, or you, of course, yeah, because the impulse comes and goes, and it's not, so you do, so the human can't, with its interpreter, create that. And if they do, it's kind of like a manipulation. And when you're manipulating you're manipulating your actions, your emotions, your chemistry, and your electricity, it's like you are not open anymore for the Earth to provide you that. Okay, so it becomes like if you are not available anymore, yeah? Because you're not open to receive. You're trying to manipulate the situation in a way. Okay, so the humans have this possibility of looking at it, describing it, which I call it the human translator, to describe it, and then to interpret it. Now, when the human does that, it doesn't do it electrically, chemically, or with an adrenaline. It does it with, I don't know what, probably the best way to say it is that they do it with a kind of a language. See, they do it with a language, okay? And and that language has a code to be able to do that. So creating outcomes is manipulations. I would say you can receive outcomes. You can't create it, like create, because it's like if the cell of my heart is trying to create what the heart has to do. It's like the heart is receiving a signal from the organism, from the global consciousness of my organism. So what the cell is doing is maybe anticipating something to do, but it's not really creating it, because there's a hierarchy in where it's receiving that message. And it's important to recognize that hierarchy, you know. It is true that, of course, when we are available and we express something, we are at the same time transforming the global consciousness of Earth. But it's more through us. It's not from us, you see. So we are transforming it, but it's through us. It's more like that. Yeah. Okay. So in this thing of the human being able to do this reflection, now this is a problem. One thing is to self-administrate it, and one thing is to self-control it. Okay. Like to control is in a way saying, okay, I don't like the signal coming, so I repress it. And the reason we repress it is because certain signals we have been seen like we have to hide that, we can't show that. Okay, so we're controlling, so we're using the ability of self-reflection or self-administration as self-control, which ends up in repression. And repression ends up in explosion at the end, because at some point that has to express itself. And maybe it doesn't express itself through you in your life, but that is still there, and it can express through your family. It's like, kind of like, if we look at the situation of priests, you know, the sexual repression, well, there's a point where that has to come out, and it comes out in a violent way. Why does it come out in a violent way? Because you didn't allow it to come in a natural doses. And because you didn't allow the natural doses to come out, it comes out in an unnatural, very much explosion. Good. So the thing is that the human, now let's go to the human consciousness, yeah, when it's receiving this. And the human consciousness is going to, in a way, it's like, yeah, it's going to try to describe and interpret. So in that description and interpretation, humans have what we could say a language, and that language has a code, okay? So what elements do the humans have? What codes do humans have to, at this point in time, to be able to make sense of a signal they receive, yeah? To do that, that translation interpretation. Well, basically, from what we know, we have what we could call, well, I'm just going to take a photo of this, and I'm going to, excellent. Well, basically, I'll ask you guys, what codes or what elements do humans have to translate and interpret a signal they receive, yeah? For example, what elements do we have? It is definitely like a kind of, we could say, verbal, yeah? I'm not sure how can I say it, but it's because it's not only verbal, really, but well, one thing we do have is graphs. Graphs as it's not very good to put in an orange. It's kind of like images. It's kind of like a representation, an image that it's a representation, yeah. So kind of like models, you see, and the models, what codes do models normally, because there's different types of models, but models tend to be, when I want to represent a model, a lot of times I use an image, don't we? Like, for example, when I was saying, okay, the global Earth, and I did this. Okay, what is this? This is a graph. It's an image. And it's an image that helps us to kind of make up a representation of something that is bigger than us, yeah? So now this graph, well, one thing is the the graph I've used, and one thing is the real, like Earth, okay? So that's also where humans also get confused. It's like they confuse the representation for like the real thing also, so that's something that we have to be aware of, that what we do. But so we have this element. Some, of course, you see there's always a progression from animals to humans, like from animals meaning the more adrenaline action to a more kind of possibility of generating a translation and interpretation. But there's some animals that can draw graphs, for example. Yeah. So there's not, when I say humans, it's kind of, take it also as a kind of like this. It's more like a rainbow kind of thing, It's not so much like, okay, here is the animal and here is the human. It's the transition is not that clear. It's not so lean. It's not so like black and white kind of thing. It's more like a grayish thing. Okay, well, this is one, graphs. For example, when I use the stencil, what is that? It's a graph. It's a graph that is giving this kind of representation. That is, what is that helping? It's not so much for your mineral kingdom. It's not so much for your vegetable kingdom. It's not so much for your animal kingdom. It's more for the human, because you see, when the human wants to do that translation, that description and interpretation, it needs elements to do it. It needs elements of translation. It needs like I call it like a library. It needs a certain library, because let me make this example. If I am a wine taster, there's one thing I have to have very well developed, which is the capacity of tasting, like the tongue. So I have to have very well the chemical kind of feel of it, you see? And the smell also, no? The smell, the chemical. Now, only with that, I can't be a very good wine taster. I have a very good basis, but I also need something which is like a library of being able to translate into a concept what each of those flavors are. Like, okay, so this flavor I can distinguish it from this flavor, and we call that, I'm not sure. I don't know a lot about wine things, but we could say more like it's a wood, more flavor, and this is more fruital, okay? So basically, if we don't have that library, we can be excellent, we can have very, very highly developed smell and taste, which is more an animal thing, isn't it? An animal, and then the animal smells and the animal tastes, but then the processing is chemical, so the vegetable, etc. Yeah? But if we don't have the library, you see, we can't communicate it. And there's something in the human kingdom that the other person is expecting us to verbalize it, to conceptualize it, to tongue it. I can't just say it has to be put into words in a way. It has to be put into, So we need this kind of like a library in our interpreter to help give this kind of translation interpretation. So one of the things we have is graphs, okay? So like when I put the stencil, like when we're doing maths, we have the graphs, don't we? We have lines, we have the y, the x, and so on. That a lot of people, they use the graphs as symbols. Okay, now that is a bit different though, the graphs and the symbol, because a symbol, a graph is more neutral. It's more like, if you see a mathematical function, I said the word maths, but please don't leave yet, okay? Please don't go. And it's more kind of, it's very clean. You see, it's very clean. It's like, oh, okay, the y and the x, and okay, so I locate something, and okay, so it's a very clean transmission. The thing about symbols is that it's very much linked to cultures. you see the symbol use, Alejandra is very hard on the symbolic kind of thing. It's not that I'm hard. I just see that it's confusing. It generates a lot of confusion. And you see is that a lot of times the symbols are connected to something that it has a cultural kind of value to it. You see, so it makes it hard. Okay, it's good. Maybe I can understand it inside the culture, but outside the culture, I can't. You see? So it has that kind of aspect. You know, symbols would be like, if I had to talk about receiver, emitter, and decoder, maybe a culture would say like the eagle, because the eagle has the wider view, and the snake because it's on the ground, and then it's in the middle, the human, because it connects the eagle with the, you know. Okay, yeah, but for some cultures, the snake is the devil. You know, it's like, that's the thing with the symbols, you see, because it has this kind of like culture influence in it. So it's and if we've got that in our interpreter, yeah, it's not the cleanest, let's say. Okay, graphs. Another one is what we call language. And language in the sense of using like letters. Because graphs is like the elements of images, letters is the elements of language, yeah? And now, letters, which make up a language, yeah, also has this thing that it differentiates cultures and all that. But the way that it is kind of seen also is that a language is what allows differentiation of expression of earth. Because a language also is not, a language also has a vibration to it. It's like when you're listening to a German person or to a French person, you don't understand a word. You don't even know how it is written, what they're saying. But you notice a frequency. And that frequency has a different feel to it. Okay, so, and it's different. So there's a differentiation in the expression. And this is very good. There's no problem with that. It's like actually it's like think that Earth in its global consciousness, and we have these cells, let's just call it like neuron cells, okay? Let's just see it as a global brain. The thing is that wherever it touches is different areas of the brain. Like, you know, when the scientists are discovering the different areas of the brain, and each area of the brain has like a different function or a different, so that function has a different vibration to it, you could say. And that's the thing of languages. Now, one thing I want to make very clear here is that we kind of, this is the way that we kind of see it. And I want to put it in a different way. We normally say that like a language belongs to a culture and it's been created by that culture, yeah? And by that population or whatever it is. Now, that is very like, if you see it from the human-centric point of view, but again, it's like if the cell of the liver cell is saying, we have created this type of cell. Like, and my grandparents, and we even have histories of how it was made, you know? And so they think that, you see, one thing is to be the carrier, and one thing is to be the creator. You see, the humans carry the evolution of Earth in the same way the liver cells are carrying an aspect of the whole organism. They're not creating it, they're carrying it. It's like they are taking it and they're expressing it. But it's kind of like we have this feel that we have created the language, you know? And the Earth has used the language through us. It's a different way of seeing it. It's more like, it's more like an unfoldment of the earth in itself. You see that? And the same thing with the graphs, etc. So it's not a human creation. Language is not a human creation. It's an earth expression through one of its cells. You know, the same way that when an organism is beginning to form itself, you know, like in the conception and it's forming itself, it's like those two. That's the otto. I'm not sure, Laura. You know, when that is already, it's not like, okay, so it is creating different aspects of itself to have different regulations of the function of that organism, like different frequencies, different dimensions of that organism. But you know, you can't, like, if the liver says we created the liver, it's, you know, it's like, no, you didn't. It was the organism. It was like the information of the organism that expressed itself in as a liver. Okay. And you guys are like, when are the number coming? But it's coming. But it's like, if without this basis, yeah, I think it's a bit confusing. So what I'm kind of saying is that the differentiation of languages does not belong. It's not created by the humans. It is expressed through the humans. It actually belongs to Earth. It's Earth consciousness. And why did it create so many languages? Because it allows it to have different frequencies of function, you know? So language is it before humans. Yeah, as a negative, yeah. As a negative, you understand that as a negative, like, so the Earth already had that algorithm. It already had that algorithm, yeah, like a potential, exactly, yeah. So the Earth already had that potential, and then when it had the evolution of the human, or the, you know, the pre-human, the humanoid, it began to provide that potential to be expressed by the human kingdom. And the human kingdom, in its maturing and its evolution, it has evolved its capacity to translate and interpret in codes. That's what humans have done. See, but the origin, the DNA of it's provided from the Earth consciousness. It is developed and expressed through the human, not through animals, or not so highly through animals, not through the vegetable kingdom, through the humans. But humans didn't create it, you know. It's like humans don't really do creations, they do discoveries, or they express a potential that has been kind of in the negative of the Earth, you know, like kind of waiting for the right time kind of thing, you know. The same, like, for example, in Emma. Emma has a negative, her puberty and her possibility of becoming a woman, we could say. But it hasn't been developed yet. It's a negative. But it doesn't mean that the organism doesn't have it. So when the organism begins to express it, you see, it's the organism expressing that potential. It's not it's not like, you know, no centralized aspect is creating it. It's more the global expressing through each aspect. So yeah, so language is just, it's more a transference. It's more like we download it. It's like, it belongs more to what do you call it? Play Store? Is it called Play Store? It belongs to Play Store, and then the device was able to download it. You see that there are certain devices that can't download certain apps? Well, that probably happens with animals. It's like they can't download that app because it's not superiority or inferiority. Eh? It's just that it doesn't belong to their function. That's it. It doesn't belong to their function. There's no such thing as like higher or lower or anything like that. That is another confusion of the humans, and it has to do with this interference. That I spoke about the interference in the last module, did I? Because there's something in our evolution that is interfered. Well, if I haven't, just let me know, because that is kind of important. Okay, graphs, letters. And there's a third one, which is numbers. Could you review interference briefly? Okay, I will do that. Let me finish this and we'll look into the interference thing, which is very important. Graphs, letters, numbers. And we also use numbers, okay? Now, there's something about numbers that is very interesting in the way we use it. And basically, we have, I know there are different systems of representing numbers, but I always choose the one that is most used by the human species. Why do we do that? Is it some like globalization thing? No, it's because for a reason Earth has chosen us to use that kind of system in when we sharing numbers together, yeah, which is the decimal system, which is the one that we all kind of know, yeah. So yeah, people say, yeah, but some culture uses something, and don't be so, what do you call it, Western centric, and it's not about that. Is that what we are using in the, because you see, this is the thing about us as humans. There is a differentiation, but there's also something that unites us, and both are important. Differentiation and something that, and you see, differentiation and interconnection. Okay, interconnection. What we have to look in interconnection is, what do we all kind of share when we communicate? Okay, what do we share? Differentiation is what each culture or what each nation uses in its own kind of particular way. And both are important, an aspect of differentiation and an aspect of interconnection. Basically, numbers are one of the, probably it's one of these elements, it is the element where we have the clearest example of sharing and interconnection. Because it has this kind of global thing to it, numbers. Letters and languages, not so much, not so much. Is that a bad thing? No, it's just, it's because there's a differentiation, but that differentiation can't be isolated. We have to, there has to be this common net which interconnects us. One of them is the English language, and that, just look at, I'm going too fast here, but English language, it comes, because English language is how the designs connect with each other, yeah? And it's basically, it's the what we call the global language, yeah? This is not so much because of imperialism and globalization, which that is the expression, but it also has to do with the code, the telephone code of the United Kingdom. Where the language was born, okay? 44. We'll get into that, I don't want to go too fast. But 44 is how the designs communicate with each other, isn't it? So it has this kind of, but when it's used by an interference, it's not how we communicate with each other, it's how I control everyone. Like, or the imperialism or the British Empire and all that. Yeah? You see, that is the interference translation of a signal. Okay, so there is something that is an interference here. And the interference is not something, it's not like Satan and a baddie. It definitely, in the living, it's not nice because it's It's inverting the signal, inverting the purpose. But from the perspective of space-time, it is a pedagogical tool. It's like a teaching tool. It's like making it hard, because when it's hard and you go through it, you come out a lot more wiser if it was easy. Okay, so it's like putting a challenge to the natural development, and the interference has a kind of wider purpose. Yeah. So I think it'll be good to have a break here. So you guys can see that humans, basically, like when you are trying to describe or do a human interpretation, which is not dissociated with where your adrenaline is taking you, what you're smelling, what you are processing chemically, or what you receive more like in the minerals and the water and then electricity. But this other level is, we need something like that. How can you describe something? How can you translate in a human kind of transmission if you don't have graphs, letters, or numbers? It's like the animals use sounds, okay, which also, but it's not enough for the humans. It's not, if I explained you this with just sounds, I guess you guys would be probably you'll be capturing it at the animal level, but at the human level you would be lost. So if you see, all the time I'm using graphs, letters, and now we're gonna look into the whole number aspect of it, okay? So very interesting. We'll be gone now and watch recording. Excellent, Miriam, take care. Lots of love to Germany, 49. Beautiful code. Okay, so let's have a break. Let's have a 10-minute break. 10-minute break, which is, let's see, it'll be, okay, it would be, yeah, in 10 minutes. All right. See you guys. Remind me to record, okay? Excellent. So, so we have this. So this could be like certain different, we could say, codes. You see, when humans want to explain something, or they want to language something, we could say, interpret something, they use a code. So this is like different levels of a code. And each are going to have their importance, we could say. And remember, so it's kind of like a way that it is the global consciousness of Earth is decoded for the human translation interpretation. Remember that the human, I repeat it a million times, but it's very important that the human translation interpretation is another level which is translated through the different kingdoms, okay? So we can't dissociate it from the others. Yeah. Like they are all kind of translating and it receives the human translation and interpretation. It is true that the human does more, it has more the interpretation function, which the other kingdoms don't have. It's not that important in interpretation. For us humans, it is. Interpretation means making sense out of it, And as humans in our library, we have these codings, graphs, letters, and numbers. So they are like different codes to decode for the human level of consciousness. Music, sounds. I'm I think music and sound is kind of like it connects the animal and the human. Well, I haven't really looked into it, but actually, for example, if we look at the human way of seeing music and coding it, it uses the graph, doesn't it? It uses the pentagram. The pentagram with the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si. So you see that's, again, is using graphs and it's using letters, but for something that is, it's more a vibration, isn't it? Like music it's a vibration, and we translate it into a way of representing it, of interpreting it. And this is the thing, when we put it into a pentagram, that is human, we can communicate it. So this is the thing, humans can administrate a design, something that animals don't do. You see, animals just, well, let's say they receive the music of the frequency of the earth, the music of the earth, and they act, they react, they stay still, but they don't look at it and administrate it. But humans can do that. And humans use, and Jeff said before, models. You see, what is the pentagram? It's a model. And what is it using? Graphs and letters mainly, I think. It also uses numbers, doesn't it? I think. When you have a pentagram, it has graphs, has lines, and then it has the, and then it has, I think it uses numbers or not, I'm not sure. Well, so you see, that's a good way of seeing it, is like how we administrate something that is not human, in the sense that it's not human. It belongs more to different areas, you see. And you see, I think that music and dance and things like that really help to bridge this we could say mineral, vegetable, animal with the human. It helps bridge that, because we want to dance, we want to move. There's a lot of animal in it, isn't it? And I think it's been very important for humans, especially because we've been so disconnected with the animal, in the sense of receiving a frequency and moving to it. That's what an animal does, doesn't it? And so it's been very important for us, music in that sense. Like children love to dance, they love that kind of dancing, because I think it's a bridge in a way from that animal to the human, because it has that rhythm that we move to, but at the same time we have that human sequence. We sequence it, So it is kind of like that merging between those two kingdoms. And of course, it does come from chemistry, you see, that's the thing. Nothing is disconnected between these kingdoms, Nothing's really disconnected. It's just different levels of expression of that emission of Earth. Okay, that's very important to see. Good. So, so this, remember, this is like codes that are decoding something that is not a code. Yeah. Now, now let's go with the numbers, which is the one that we want to look at. I'm not sure if this is going to confuse you, but because, yeah, I'm not going to use that for now. Maybe later and see if that works out. Now, numbers. Now, one thing mainly the humans use numbers for, language is something we use to communicate, don't we? Yeah, to communicate outside of ourselves. And numbers is something that is used in the human kingdom to measure things and to quantify things. So it is mainly like, if in the common denominator, it's seeing numbers and that kind of measuring and quantifying things, okay? But here I'm going to express a different use of numbers, which is not so much about measuring in a way it is, but it's not so much about measuring and quantifying. It's not about 1, 2, 3. It's not about quantities, okay? Sino, but it is, I did a Spanglish there. But it's for sequence it's a code, we could say it's a code, which allows us to sequence different dimensions of Earth consciousness, we could say. I know that sounds very strange, so let me give you an example. You see that light? Light, this is the best way I can word it. Like a light is all the frequencies at the same time, isn't it? Like when an emission of light, it's all the frequencies at the same time. But then when that light refracts, it unfolds itself, it has a kind of an expression. It has this expression of what we call the rainbow, okay? And what is the rainbow? It's just different frequencies sequenced. So it's different frequencies that are sequenced, where each color has a position. Now, this is also something, this example is going to help me to also communicate something. Now, light, the nature of light is what we call non-linear. What does that mean, non-linear? It means that it's all together. All the frequencies are kind of together, yeah? So it's non-linear. And that's the thing about global consciousness. It's kind of like, it's non-linear. It's all the aspects of Earth together. It's like, that's why normally when we see non-linear, we represent it with a circle, don't we? Because a circle has that thing that all the lines are connecting. It's like, it's if we have a circle and a center of that circle, it has this infinite amount of angles or lines to it, isn't it? So this is, we could say, okay, this is like the global consciousness of the Earth, but we're a receiver here, let's just say this is kind of like a refraction. This is like one receiver, another receiver, and different points, yeah? What we call the superficie of Earth. So you see this, okay? And this is just a way of explaining it. You see, I'm using a graph, can you see? I'm using a graph to be able to translate something that is previous to the graph. It's a consciousness that is previous, but I'm using a graph to channel it into human communication. Now, you see, it's non-linear, like the Earth is connecting all the frequencies together, but we are a part of it, so we are sequencing it. We are expressing an aspect of that global consciousness. Can you see? So that another way of seeing it is like light, and when it goes into a prism, we're like a prism. You know a prism? So we're like a prism. So and we are kind of expressing a range, a frequency range of that light. Okay? So we are a prism in a way, we could, yeah, it's just the ways of explaining it, yeah? Or we're a vehicle that, I can't process the whole consciousness of Earth, because that would be misplacing myself, but this is important. But I am connected to all the consciousness of Earth. This is very important because within me, I have, probably I express in consciously or in positive a range of that light, okay, of the consciousness of Earth. Now, there's a whole bunch of ranges that I'm not seeing, which are negative, what we call in unconscious to me. But they're unconscious because I'm focusing I'm channeling a certain kind of frequency. But what does happen when we evolve as in our own function, we begin to, that which is negative can begin to participate more consciously. Good. So this is the thing. So we have that non-linear consciousness, which refracts into the different frequencies of light. And this is where we use a way to sequence it, to differentiate that. But it's all the same light in different frequencies. So there we say, okay, the wavelength. And we use a number to calculate the wavelength and say, okay, this has a slower wavelength and this has a faster wavelength. But you see, that is a way to sequence it. Something which is not separate, but we do have to sequence it, okay? And then we sequence it, and then kind of like we say, okay, from this frequency, wave frequency, to this wave frequency, we're going to call that red, okay? We're going to call that red. You see, so there we go from the primary expression of light, which refracts itself, and then we use a code like numbers, okay, to kind of sequence it because us humans in our human consciousness, it's like we function in sequence. We sequence things, okay, but Earth consciousness doesn't work that way. You see, but we do. That's why I said. Remember, I said that what happens if the emitter and the receiver speak different languages? Well, there has to be a translator here in the middle. Okay. Okay. So that's the thing. So so then we differentiate it, saying using, for example, wavelength, and saying, okay, this speed, wavelength, this speed, this. And then we say, okay, now we put a word to it. You see, this is red, this is orange, and etc. This is yellow. You see how, like, it's just different stages of, but at the end, it's all light. So it's all light, but we do have to sequence it. So what do numbers allow? Numbers are like a coding, it's very special coding because it is a coding that it has in its coding, how can I say this? The structure, the fractal structure of, for now, let's say, of Earth consciousness. I don't think it's only Earth consciousness. I don't think it's not only Earth consciousness. Really, at least it's the solar system. Okay, with the sun and 9 planets. Okay, so it's that fractal put into numbers. So it's got the structure of that. This is where it becomes hard to explain things. So if anyone wants to stop me here, you see that has a structure to it, and that structure has an order, and that order is very cleanly represented in what we have as number code. Okay, so it's like numbers, the thing that numbers have that letters don't have, it's very kind of neutral, clean, kind of technical, you know. You see, it's easier to lie with words, but it's harder to lie with numbers. Like, for example, somebody can say that with words, he is rich and he has a lot of money, and he say, okay, show me your bank account, you know. The thing is that the numbers are not going to lie. You can say whatever you want with the words, you see, this is something that does happen. That words, we have also used words to also create images that are not true. When we use words to, you see, this is the thing of the human challenge, you know. It can use its elements of translation and interpretation to create virtual, to not try to decode the global consciousness of the Earth, but to make inventions, to invent, to lie. Okay, this also has to do with the interference. Yeah? Not to translate and interpret where I am, but to translate and interpret an illusion. And the question is, why would they want to do that? Because they want to trick someone. You see, that has to do with the interference. Wanting to lie. It's not a moral thing, right? But you see, we can use any tool of space-time. We can use it functionally or dysfunctionally. And it's never about the tool. It's never about the tool. It's never about the tool. It's always about with which purpose are we using that tool. This is very, 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 very important. Because a lot of times we think it's about the tool. It's like, you know, money, this whole thing of money is, there's a phrase that people tend to use with money, isn't it? It's the source of all evil. You see, like money, you see that? You're not understanding the thing there. Is that you are blaming a tool and you're not blaming the consciousness, which is the purpose of a consciousness which is using that tool. It's like you confuse it. You think that the knife killed the guy. The knife didn't kill the guy. A consciousness with a purpose used the knife to kill the guy. So that's where we have to see that the cause is not so much a tool, it is the level of consciousness behind the tool. Okay? Good. So language is not a problem. The thing is, what is the consciousness behind the language? Yeah? But there's something about numbers that it has this purity in it. It's like it has this, very clean coding, very clean code, very, very clean, you know. But now I want for us to see numbers as, so a way of saying it, you see, oh, it's raining. Okay, when you see light, there are no frequencies there. So there's no sequence of frequencies. Okay, but there is in its nature, we can say negative, like there is an order in there, but we can't see it in light. We have to refract it, and there we see the order. Okay, when it refracts, there we see the order of a frequency, but in light there is none. Okay, but that's where we say that in light, in the, let's put Earth consciousness, it's not made out of frequencies, it's made out of parameters. Okay. Hopefully I'm not going to confuse you with this, but let's say the nonlinear, in this case, let's put something, you know, that we can connect with Earth consciousness. Centralized Earth consciousness. It has parameters. Parameters. When it expresses and it unfolds itself, okay, into differentiation, we could say, like in the linear, those parameters become what we could call codes. Codes. So the codes are ways to represent something which is going to become which is a frequency. Okay. So got myself into some trouble, yeah. Okay, let's put human here, human consciousness. So human consciousness is, okay, these parameters, which end up being frequencies, and we're going to use a code to sequence, to differentiate them. And the codes, probably the cleanest code is numbers. Meaning that we can sequence this parameter of Earth consciousness, which then expresses itself as frequencies, in 9 units. In 9 units, okay? Including 0. Whew. Let's see, somebody. Oh, that's okay, in 9 units. So, excellent. So what is the difference between 0 for now? Let's take 0 for now as solar consciousness. It is like, 0 is like something that isn't any number, but it is emanating to all numbers. So let's just put it as so, because something we have to understand is that the Earth is an unfolded aspect of the sun. Okay? So it's like the 0 is the common denominator of the sequence. The common denominator of the sequence. So all of the planets are actually cold pieces of the sun. It's the unfoldment, yeah? So 0, let's leave it to the sun for now. Okay. But and what is the difference if we're looking at, so then we got a scale here, don't we? We are scaling. That's something about it. We are scaling, we are sequencing, we are scaling. And so what is the difference between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And remember that really, let's put 0 here. It's actually 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 4, 0, 5, 0. So it's solar consciousness unfolding itself or looking at itself as, it's like 0 is like that non-linear, isn't it? It's like 0 is like that light. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is like how that light is sequenced in codes. And you know, a differentiation of codes. And that has a frequency expression. So, now this is the thing. We tend to say, if I say to someone, what's the difference between 1 and 2? They're going to say, okay, look, here is 1 and here is 2. So they're going to explain the difference as quantity of a measurement. Now, the way we're going to see it here is not so much as quantity amount, it's more like a frequency. It's hard, let's put frequency. So it's like, it is a frequency of, in this case, Earth consciousness. It's a frequency of Earth consciousness. Okay, so what's the, and this is another thing. It's a frequency of consciousness, not of amount of objects. This is a difference. So we're looking at numbers as something that is sequencing consciousness. Okay? It's not just sequencing objects, it's sequencing consciousness. This is where people start to go. Now, what's the difference between 1 and what's the difference between 2? That 1 is lower in the sense that it is slower. So let's see that consciousness, we can organize the unfoldment of consciousness in speeds, in different speeds. Like, remember the light? It refracts in different speeds. And we call from here to here, we call it 1. From here to here, we call it 2. From here to here, we call it 3. So we are sequencing linearly something which is non-linear. Good? Excellent. So meaning that 1 is a slower frequency of consciousness. What does slower mean? Slower means it is more, it's more kind of concrete. It's more like tangible. It's more tangible. For now, let's put it that way. It's more like tangible, okay? So when it's more like materialized, it has more gravity. It has more gravity to it, see? The slower, more gravity. The faster, less gravity, okay? And this is, we are using concepts here, yeah? We're using concepts to channel and talk about something which is not so much conceptual. There's our sound music connection. Each sound note octave has a measurable, let me see, a measurable vibration frequency. Excellent. Yeah. It is important to say that at the same time, music isn't the generator. So like vibration and sound is still an effect. Okay, it's not the generator, it's still an effect of something so there are levels of expression here. And the more we go to the source, it's more kind of invisible, let's say. And the more we kind of go out of the source into its emanation, it's more tangible. So music, sound, vibration, for example, what is language? When we talk, we are using a vibration, and that vibration has a sound, okay? But that vibration and that sound is coming from something which is not a vibration, it is not a sound. It is a parameter of consciousness. But you can break it down to its component parts. Yeah, but you see it's a fractal structure. But music it is seeing it at the aspect of vibration. What I'm saying is that there's another aspect behind it that's not vibration. It's more like information, let's say, for now. And they share the same structure. Yeah, you see, and numbers are just a way of us to verbalize that other aspect, because it's not even numbers. You see, there's a moment that it is not, it's not a code, it's a parameter. Okay, see, we're going deep into the rabbit hole, but you know, still numbers are a way of coding, a very clean way of coding something that is previous to it, which is parameters, which is not, it's like parameters in this, there's no coding to it, you know. Whew. You still with me, guys? Okay, so it's like a lot of people, for example, a lot of people tend to see, okay, what is the pattern of life? And they say they're looking in the expressed, the pattern, and they see like geometry, like, you know, there's this geometry pattern. And this geometry has a number pattern associated with it. You see, but still, okay, that is very beautiful to see. But I'm saying that there's another level, that is expressed. There's another level that we call the non-expressed, which is so meaning that geometry that you're seeing expressed with that kind of numbers, there is another level which is previous to that. That is still the positive, it's still the projection. Okay? It's still a projection. It's not like that algorithm behind it, in a way. I think it's very beautiful at the same time. Now, well, not for everyone. Some people will begin to talk about this and they're like, what the hell? I'm just going to put the lights. Good. Okay, so let's try to give a way to, and then I'm going to use the calculator as a way of organizing this. Okay, but just to have we could say that 1, okay, 0, the common denominator, okay. 1 would be a code, it would be something that is describing the slowest speed, which we could call like, it's more tangible, okay, more, let's put the criteria of more gravitational, less gravitational. So if we have this extreme here, highly gravitational, highly non-gravitational, okay? It's, and again, you know, it's expressing this in a way that we can verbalize it. So now this is the thing, remember that I said that we see and we say, okay, this is a certain frequency, and then we call it red, but the red is just the way that a name we give to that. Now, a name we could give to 1 is what we call matter, or, you know, or expressed, I'm not sure, matter probably is the physical manifestation. Now, you're going to see that the two ends are very interrelated in a way, because in 1, let's put 1 as individual. You see, 1, we've got 1 here, 1 here. Okay, so it's something that is tangible, it's already manifested. It's tangible, it's, you know, I can see it's 1 and here's another 1. It's tangible, different, yeah? Now, the thing is that in each one, it expresses or it contains all these others in negative. But so in 1, it has 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, but not visible, we could say, not tangible. But so okay, 2. Now, if you see 1 is the slowest, and 2 is a bit faster, isn't it? With numbers, we say 1 is the least amount in a what we call it, in a full unit, and the second would be 2, but 2 is more than 1. 2 is more than 1. So in this terms, we could say it is got a higher frequency. It's got a higher frequency. Okay, it's got a higher frequency than 1. So it's a bit more abstract, it's a bit more intangible. It's less tangible. It's got a bit less gravity. Okay? And then we put a word to it. But you see, the word is limited. This is what I'm trying to, like, I say red, okay, but when I say red, each of you guys have an image of red, okay? Meaning that within red, there's a lot of variations of red. But red is just a way to unify that range of speed. That's the thing with words, that the number is always saying more than any word. Because one, I say matter, but it's not, there's other way that biological expression, so that we can use different words to talk about that same range. Okay? 2 is, it's a bit faster than 1, isn't it? Now, what word can we use? Well, 2 is already something that it's not just a matter, it is how that matter is moving, how it's vibrating within. So we could call it, in a way, energy and movement. But you see, energy and movement is what is just an abstract thing. It's just a more untangible, not abstract, untangible level of 1. Because anything that is matter rarely is, in a way, a vibration. It's energy and movement. But it is expressed tangibly. It's like the rainbow, they're all connected. Good. 3. Now, it's a bit higher than 2, isn't it? But lower than 4. And 3, if we put it into words, the closest that, I can, this is the trick, this is the thing, is that we can't reduce 1 to the word matter. We can't reduce 2 to the word vibration or energy and movement. You see, we can't reduce the speed of frequency to any word. This is the thing, is like word is still kind of cutting it up a bit. Yeah, I'm using a word because it helps. It helps to end up, okay, grab it. But what we can't do is, the word is defining the whole number. No. You can't, no word can define the whole number. That is reductionism. But the number can express that word, you see? Now 3, like, just a second. Okay, sorry. 3, it's a bit more, or a bit more speed. And we could call it, in our human language, we could call it something like, not so much vibration, it's more like if it's more, it has a content of information, but in a linear way. Like, it's more about, it's like how that vibration is moving that body, you could say. Okay. So, and now, what do we call? We would say this is the biological plane. This is the energy and movement, the circuits, and this is kind of like the neurology of it. Okay, it's like the neurology that is allowing the animal to move. But now, what is 4? 4 is a bit more non-gravitational, and 4 is the possibility of establishing a model to use that information that is moving into a reality, okay? And this is another thing with the numbers. They work in both directions. So 4 would be like a format, a design. But you see, a design hasn't got gravity, but a design can use that information to move a certain circuit to create something. But you see, it's like it's a bit more intangible, but it has a relationship with the tangible. Okay. And again, one thing is the number, and one thing is the word we're kind of using to express a nature of the number. Good. 5 is kind of like 5 is kind of like a bit of a non-linear consciousness. So it's like the way that we are administrating that format to use that information, we could say, to move. So it's a bit more intangible. Basically, this is what I've been explaining with the planes, but now what I'm trying to take you to is that what I have been explaining with words comes from something which has a higher integrity of consciousness, which words are just a portion of explaining it. Just like a portion of explaining it. Yeah. 6, we could say it's, again, it's the potential which has this logic, but it's a logic that is not, it's not like a mental logic, it's a non-linear logic. Yeah. And it's a potential. This is the 7 always has this concept of uniting it, like 7 notes, you know, 7 notes, and it has that kind of thing of uniting all those frequencies. It's like a number which 7 colors, you know, it's like this. It has this aspect of like an absolute aspect of it. Now, this you're going to understand it better with a calculator, yeah, because I'm just kind of what I want you to understand with this is that the difference between the sequence is a difference, we could say, which is more gravitational to something which is not so gravitational. Okay, more, yeah, we can do it that way. 8 is how all these 7 synchronize. That's why 8 has that synchronicity thing. Because at the same time, you see that all the colors are different, but they all synchronize together. So what is I call 8 the, what do they call it in biology? Connective tissue. You know, the connector, it's like 8 is like the connective tissue, that it doesn't belong specifically to any of them, but to all of them, kind of like that, yeah? And 9 is the direction, the purpose behind that which is being interconnected. So it's very, very, like very intangible. You see, it's like the purpose, the function, the direction that is interconnecting all these levels together. Okay, guys, what I think this is going to be a bit more clear. It's going to help you to order a bit more this when we look at the calculator, how the calculator organizes the numbers. It's gonna give you a good model of organization, of sequencing. For now, it's what I'm trying to express is that numbers are a code that us humans have, which has the DNA or expresses. It has the structure of, let's say for now, of like space-time expressed in it, especially of the solar system that we're living in. Okay, meaning that it is a very clean way of sequencing speeds or frequencies of consciousness, of the consciousness, of light. Let's say that light is that the thing is that when I say light and a prism and the rainbow, you are only seeing energy and movement there. But I'm saying, no. There's it's not only, it's consciousness. You see? It's like consciousness in its non-differentiated form uses a prism, and it has a structure of organization, and that structure of organization is that consciousness sequence in speeds, which goes from a more gravitational or a more tangible to a less gravitational and less tangible. And this gives us a code that allows us to see that fractal structure behind it. But it's more about consciousness than energy of light. Light is just a way of expressing it, but it's more about consciousness. The thing about consciousness is that all consciousness is expressed into energy, but it is an energy, consciousness. You see, because consciousness is using my energy for me to communicate something, but where is my consciousness? You see, you can't really, the pattern of consciousness, the structure, is expressed in the structure of light, which organizes itself in a geometrical form, and so on and so forth, in frequencies. But consciousness is nothing, it's not a vibration. Because a lot of people say, okay, something vibrates and then consciousness comes out of it. No, consciousness is the one behind the organization of that vibration, not the other way around. Consciousness is more, it has a higher hierarchy in the scale. Yeah, it's not the other way around. It's not like with energy you have consciousness. No, it's with consciousness you have the pattern which organizes energy. So that's the untangible is the one that is administrating the tangible. Okay, if you guys are still on planet Earth, let's take a 5-minute break, and I'm going to use the calculator, which I think is going to help put the pieces together a bit better. Okay. Fibonacci is an expression chronologically. Did consciousness? No, it's not a chronology. See, that's a different. It's not a chronological thing. How can I say? It's like it's more about, you see, when you're seeing me, at the same time, there are different levels that are making up me. It's like it's a non-linear organization. So I have right now when we're speaking, I have atoms. Those are make up molecules, which make up cells, which make up. But it's more like a Russian doll difference. It's not like first this, first that. It's not in time. It's not like something in time. It's something which is it's organized in the timeless. And then when it unfolds in time, it expresses that same kind of movement or pattern. Yeah, but first it's timeless. First it's timeless, the sequence. It's like if I'm coding a program and it's all kind of the coding, it's all together, but just imagine that program is going to make up a video game, okay? But it's all kind of coming together in the same algorithm or the same coding. But then when I play the game, it has a sequence. Now, in the coding of it, there's no sequence. There's no like this first, this second, this third, this. It's all kind of together. But when I play the game, it has a sequence. So it's not a chronological hierarchy. It's actually a non-linear hierarchy. It's like when you see light kind of have that separation. That is just something. It's a nature of light. It has nothing to do with like something chronological. It's just the nature it has, the intrinsic, essential nature. Intrinsic and essential nature. But this is the paradox, that when it is displayed in time, it also follows kind of like that sequence. So yeah, so don't see, because like when they say what existed first, consciousness or energy, it's not that, is that they both are eternal. Both are eternal. What I'm saying is this is the key, I got it. Which has more influence, which is the one that has influenced the administration. That's the hierarchy I'm talking about. It's more about which one has a higher influence in the administration. It's not about time. It's like consciousness administrates energy, not the other way around. So, but they both eternal. Like there's no beginning and end to energy either. It's eternal. It's like it's hard for us. Scientists are trying to put it a length of time with some sort of Big Bang, and it just doesn't feel that way to me. But I'm not talking about that kind of hierarchy. I'm talking about, in the way that, let's say, without my atoms, there is no complex nervous system. So there's this hierarchy of influence, okay? It's more in that sense. The hierarchy I'm talking about.
David, I have a question, quick question for clarification. Is it also like a continuum, like the rainbow, where it's not so clearly differentiated between 1 and 2, also where 1 finishes and 2? It's not like with quantities, as we normally see 1, that's 1, that's 2, it's more, okay.
Yes. Yeah, true. So the thing is that we, in our human translation, we need to sequence.
Right. but yeah, yeah.
Really, you know, from 1 to 2, it's a continuum. It's like you stretch something which is the same band. It's like if you're stretching light, but it's all the same. It's all, there's no like, okay, here it's like, you know,
Yeah.
it's a thing. This is something very hard because words and us humans, we very much are connected in a linear way, you know, of sequence. It has to do with our function, but really, we always have to see the universe as it's more like a band. It's more like an elastic band where there's no like separation. It's just the differentiation. So yeah, that would be that would be the thing.
Good.
Excellent, guys. Let's go for should we say what time is it? Let's go for like a 5-10 minute break. No, let's go for a 10-minute break and we will come back, okay? Explain this, yeah? Something. You see, what I was saying, there was light, and light then kind of, in a way, let's say, goes through a prism, and then it refracts and unfolds itself in different levels of frequency. Now, you see, the light is an expressed aspect of what we could say. Light, we always put it as white, don't we? White light. Now, that is an expressed aspect of something that is not expressed, which we could call black. You see? Another thing of the interference is to see black as something to polarize, like to see black as the source of evil or things like that, you know, like, but black is just the non-expressed. And then so really what is sustaining that white expressing is a black. Like a non-expressed black, and then it expresses itself white, and then it refracts, it sequences itself, and then we have the colors. See? But, you know, like it's in a way that black is the source of evil. Well, no, black is the source of light. Actually, one thing is that, have you seen that when you have a black t-shirt, it absorbs the light? Well, that's because there's attraction there, because the black has, we could say, a wider hierarchy than white. That's why it's absorbed and not the other way around. But it's not like an enemy thing, you know, it's not like black against white, is that it's two aspects of the same absolute consciousness. So dividing it and putting into goodies and baddies, that has to do with the interference also. Because if not, everything that is black to us, which is non-expressed, we see it as an enemy, when it's actually the new version, a version that hasn't been expressed yet. So it's in black. You know, I remember they have a lot of this stuff, and it's very much installed in a very deep level, like in a very deep level of cells. And I remember at one point I was kind of there was this new pedagogical projects and all that, and so I was kind of helping in at that point, very kind of new agey at that point. And I remember the lady said, draw whatever you want, but you can't use you can't use the color black. You can't use it, because like if it was a bad thing, you know. And we have that associated, very ingrained, like black is bad, you know. And I remember it annoyed me so much. It really, so I did it all black. You know, like a rebellion, you know, like because you see, it isn't that way of seeing it, you know. It's a communication between two aspects of the absolute, you know. So the whole, you know, Star War, the whole war between the black and the, you know, it has to do with with monsters and this kind of like if it all has that aspect to it. And no, black is just what isn't white yet. So it's like it has the infinite potential for white to express. That's black. Yeah? It's what we call the unconscious of emptiness, remember? That's what black. Good, so, and you see the sun is just emanating light. And the question is, where is it getting that light from? You know? Well, we could say in a way from like a black hole, like something that is not expressed, which has an infinite tank to express. So it's like burning, yeah. Good. So this is going to help. I think this is going to help you guys a lot. Okay. It helped me a lot. And basically, there's another fractal structure of what we could call the three positions in space-time. Anything in space-time has three positions. One position is what we call a particular position, an individual position, particular, like a particular position. And that at the same time is connected to what we're going to call a relative position. And that is at the same time connected to an absolute position. So let me put it biologically, okay? So we have the cells. Let's take a liver cell, okay? I don't know why I really love the liver. For some reason, I always use the liver. Let's say a liver cell, okay? Well, that cell has a particular position, which is different to the other cell, liver cell, okay? Now, to be able to understand the particular position it has, we have to see it into a relative position, meaning that that cell is functioning for an organ, for the liver organ, okay? So we have particular, relative. Relative has to do with function. Function has to do with function. So the liver is providing the function of the cell, and the cell is what's executing that function. It's what is actually like doing it, okay? So we have particular position, relative position, and then we have an absolute position. In this case, it would be the body. Okay, so the meaning that the liver is connected to the body. It's a function of the body. Okay, so we always, and this is what we call a logical fractal, because at the same time, for example, my body is a particular position within a relative position, which is Earth, which is within an absolute position, which is the solar system. So it's a fractal, like everything has all the positions at the same time. Okay, but to not get confused, particular position, relative position, absolute position. Are we good with that? Okay. Okay, can you see here that there are, it's like if there are bands that are unifying these, like grouping these together, okay? 1, 2, 3 is going to be like the frequencies or the codes or whatever you want to call the parameters that are linked to the particular position. Okay? 4, 5, 6 are more what is connected to the relative function. And 7, 8, 9 is what's connected to the absolute, in a way. No? Now, can you see when I'm talking about gravity, anti-gravity, in a way, or yeah, gravity more anti-gravity? Like, okay, the particle is like, it has this gravity to it, isn't it? A particle is already like manifested, and it's at the bottom. This is at the bottom, gravity. At the top, anti-gravity, you see? Okay, so it has that also leveling there. Particular, relative, and absolute. So the absolute is like that organism, and this is an aspect in the organism, and this is what's giving it its functionality. Its functionality between the absolute and the particular. Good. Now, if you see, there's also, this is also in columns, there's a differentiation here. Yeah. We have this one here, this one, and this one. This one I call the points. Alejandra calls it the three characters, or the 3 points of communication. Like the three, like remember the receiver, the emitter, and the decoder? It's like that. It's like the three, I don't know what to call it, but it's like the 3 points of communication. Okay? Let's put it, points of communication. Now, the emitter has this kind of absolute aspect, you know, like my body is the emitter and my cell is the receiver, and the liver is kind of translating it into a function. You see? And these are the points of communication. These are going to be the circuits which communicate those points. You see, so it's like the circuits. Now, 2 is a particular circuit, 5 is a relative circuit, and 8 is an absolute circuit. You understand what I mean by circuit? Circuit is something that connects 2 points. Yeah? So these are the circuits. Good. So we have the points of communication, okay, which, like that. We have the circuits, because you see, the circuit that is connecting one is more a vibrational circuit. It's more like an energetic circuit. But the circuit that is connecting 4, the model or the design, it's more an abstract kind of circuit. It's more like the logic that is the circuit of the design. It's abstract. It's not so chemical, you know. And then 8, which is that interconnected tissue, which is a circuit that is interlinking all the circuits, and it's absolute. It's like an absolute circuit, which is connecting all the circuits between each other. Okay. Now, when I call 3, 6, 9, how can I say? It's I call it the message. It is like the purpose, which that purpose is expressed through a potential, and that is it is received neurologically. It's let's for now, let's put the message, okay? It's like the 3 levels of the message. Probably, I'm not sure, probably there's a better word for it, but so you see, we don't capture the message in the, so this is the thing, yeah? We have a communication between a receiver, an emitter, and something which is decoding it, okay? Those are 3 positions also. And we have a circuit that is connecting them. But what are they transmitting? They're transmitting a message. See, that's kind of like 3, 6, 9. It's like the message that is being, the purpose, yeah, which is captured by the organ as a potential, and that potential is received in a more understanding. In the human kingdom, it's more like that, understanding in 3. So I'm not sure if you can kind of see this. Like, the numbers are organizing a system of communication. A system of communication. So if I had to put it more like in a more of a drawing, let's put it. Let me use the analogy I was using before. So one, let's call it for now the liver cell. Okay. 4, it's the liver, the design of the liver. But let's see if you can kind of see this. Actually, the liver is just a bunch of cells. Okay. That's the liver. And 7, let's call it the body. All right. So we have the 3 positions, the 3 points of communication, the positions. Good. Okay. Excellent. Now, this absolute is going to send, a purpose. And that purpose is going to be synchronized through the whole body. But, you see, that same purpose has to be used differently by each of the cells. Can you see that? Like, if it's cold, for example, let's say that it's cold. That's the message. It's cold. Well, that has to be received differently, because one thing is that temperature for my skin, and another thing is for the vital organs. So that message, it is circuited through the whole body, but it has a different potential for each of the logic, because that's the thing. The design of the, what's it called? The liver has a different purpose. And it's going to use that message, that purpose through its potential. It's not going to take that purpose and do it the way that the heart does it. It's going to do it through its own relative potential. Okay, and it's going to use its own circuits. Now, 2 is a circuit that it's in contact. Okay, so it's going to use its own chemistry in a way and to capture that message through its particular position. How did that go? Did it help or? Okay. So basically, what is numbers? What are numbers? It is a code that us humans have that is it has the DNA in that code of the structure of how it has the structure of how say a space-time sequences its consciousness, or at least let's say Earth space-time sequences its consciousness. So what does it give us? It gives us a library in which we can translate the signals that are coming to us through Earth. This is what it's providing us. Remember when I was saying about the wine taster? So a wine taster can be very connected to the taste and can notice different tastes. But once the wine taster wants to explain in a human consciousness what the taste is, it has to have a good library. So what is this going to provide for you guys? What if you want to begin to say, okay, I'm interested in this new language, because it's not only a new library, how can I say? It's not only, it's like a whole new it's a new model. It's a new language you can incorporate, you know. And the beauty is that numbers it's something that we all can communicate with. So if I say in English, I say the word 44, maybe you won't understand me if you're Chinese or whatever. But if I do this, you will. So what does it mean? It allows us to connect with a type of code that has a global condition to it. Yeah, it has like a global condition. It has a global, it is a library which uses a global code. We could say like it is a mathematical library, you know, section of the library. Now, this is where, because really what I'm trying to explain in this module, I'm actually seeing that there is a difference between this module and the next one. What I'm trying to explain here is the nature of this language. Like where does it come from, you know? What way we're going to use it? And now the interesting thing is that the way that Earth has sequenced its space and its time, we humans have classified it in numbers. And we think, now this is the thing, you're going to say, yeah, but it's a human invention. No, it's not a human invention. It is an Earth expression through the human. It's not a human invention. This is something, can you guys get that? Like, whatever we are organizing as a human species really is it's a message that's being sent by Earth, and we have translated in our own neurology and the neurology of our particular. But it previously came from an absolute message. We have translated into our particular message in the human design. So why Laura?
So this means that, yeah, so this means that the calculator is expressing something that is really generated by the Earth, and it would be the same then with language.
Yes. Yeah.
Verbal language, like words, and also the phone, because the phone, you know, it goes the other way around, the phone.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm just checking my phone.
I have, there is something that, because the calculator is to calculate and the phone is to communicate, isn't it?
Yes.
So, okay, now the calculator, I'm not sure if I'm going to get it. The calculator is more expressing the order of the unconscious, because the unconscious, what it does is reorganizes and calculates an algorithm. And then when it reaches the conscious, we communicate it. So the order of the phone is the order of communication, and the order of the calculator is an order of configuration. So when we communicate something, that is already being configured by our unconscious.
Okay, so that would make sense because they're opposite. They're going the different direction. Okay. Okay.
Because you have unconscious and conscious. It's like the same thing, but inverted. You see? That's basic. So this is more expressing how the unconscious is administrating and organizing the algorithm, let's put it in that word. And then we have how it's communicated. But you see how it's communicated, it's the other way around of how it's configured. Because, for example, the unconscious, the first thing it does is starts with 9, and the last thing it does, it reaches 1. But when we are living, the last thing we find is the purpose of our experiences. We find it at the end. But that purpose in the unconscious was configured at the beginning. Okay? But we discover it linearly when we are going through the whole thing. At the end, we say, all that had purpose. Wow. But we find it at the end. But our unconscious knew it from the beginning. Yeah? Kind of thing. Actually, what the unconscious didn't know is how it's going to manifest. So it's like they have different, like the unconscious is the one that's surprised. Oh, that's how the purpose manifested, you know? And we're like, oh, that was the purpose of the manifestation. So it's like a communication between the unconscious and the conscious. Yeah? I don't use the phone one because I think it's gonna create a confusion. So I'm just gonna stick to this one. But there is a relationship there. There's a relationship there. Yeah? So what was I going to say? Okay, so what is also interesting with this structure, like now, what do we have? Now, think that Earth is a space-time, okay? Meaning it has different areas of space, okay? Let's say it has first, it has a nucleus, it has the intermediate aspects and the membrane. Now, on top of it, it also has different space, like it has different areas. What we call, well, one thing is the North American continent, and one thing is the South American continent, and one thing is Europe, and one thing, okay? So it has different areas of space. Also, it's located in a different moment in time. The whole planet, of course. Time is something that it's a common denominator for us, but it's in a point in time, okay? So do we have tools as humans that organizes space and organizes time? Yes, we do. The one that organizes space is what we call the coordinates in numbers. Do we have a tool that uses numbers to organize it? Yes, we do. Space is in coordinates. You know the coordinates like latitude, longitude, and all that. Okay, I'm not gonna use that too much because it's very precise, but the thing is that it's very complex. So, do we have another way of differentiating in numbers the different countries and the different continents and all that? Yes, the telephone codes. The telephone codes we have. And you say telephone codes? Yeah, well, that's the way that I can communicate with that country. So if that's the way I can communicate with that country, it's the way that I can connect with that frequency. And that's, so what the telephone codes are from the Earth, it's a way of organizing and sequencing in a codes, in a number system, the frequencies of the membrane of the Earth, of the territory of the Earth. Okay, that on one side, that is space, okay? We have a way of sequencing and differentiating the space of the territory through telephone codes, latitude and longitude. And with time, do we have any tool that organizes time through numbers? Yes, the calendar. We have the calendar. But isn't that a human invention? No, it's a human expression. It's not a human invention. So what is true, it still has the way that the humans can translate this global purpose into their own neurology. So yes, it does have it is the way that the liver is translating that message of the body to the liver cells. Okay, so, but who created the liver? The organism. Okay, so that's basically what we're going to be that's what we're going to be seeing in the next module, which is now how does this number system, which has the DNA of this global structure, how does it sequence itself and express itself in the space-time of Earth? Yeah, and does this have anything to do with the place and the moment one person is born? It has a lot to do with the place and the moment somebody is born. Does it have to do where I'm living? Of course it has to do with where you're living. Does it have to do with the people I'm related with? Of course it has to do with the people you're related with. Because you're not related only because of human choice. You're related because there's a synchronicity of frequencies. There's a resonance. There's a resonance. And that resonance is kind of like the body saying, that cell and that cell, I want you to work together because you are gonna. So at the end, this is where we have to become very humble and say, okay, so it's Earth consciousness which is moving the whole thing. And that is still relative in that sequence because it's actually sun consciousness, which is etc., etc. But sometimes it's better to reduce it because if not, the orientation is so big that we can't guide ourselves. So that's why I want to keep it to Earth, because if not, it's just, if I tell you, Susan says, where am I? And I say, on planet Earth. Says, yeah, but I want to go to the restaurants, whatever. And I just say planet Earth. Well, okay, thanks for giving me the broader picture, but you know, I need a bit more, I need you to reduce the scale. So that's why I'm going to reduce the scale to Earth, to have a better guide, because I think practically on space-time, one thing that we have to begin to do is establish the coherent relationship with the organism we are part of, which is Earth. You see, that is very fun. Okay, it's great to say the universe is moving me, but I need something to be able to function more. And if the cell isn't able to function with the body, you know, like, okay, how is that body gonna work with other bodies? You know, like, so the cell has to locate itself in its function and on that body. So that's why I'm gonna kind of reduce it to Earth at this point, okay? The thing is, you can't understand time without the sun. So we're gonna have to put the sun also there, because there's no such thing as time without the sun. So at the same time, the sun is gonna come into the equation, huh? But so I think, what do I see numbers as? I see it as something that the Earth has provided the human kingdom for its function, and apart from being able to do calculations and to be able to build more efficiently and more precisely things and all that, I also think, no, what I capture, I don't think I capture it, is that it's also a way of Earth communicates the way that it organizes its consciousness on this global brain. And the question is, and why do us humans have the opportunity, you know, to have this tool? Because the Earth wants it to, basically, because it must have been in our function, basically, and it's not better, it's not worse. So I think it's giving us the blueprint of how Earth administrates its space-time, for us to participate with our interpretations and to have that way of seeing and understanding how Earth interconnects its elements. And also it gives us, because also something that we like is to understand deeply, you know, okay, yes, I'm Dave and I'm a human being, but there's something also it wants to understand itself deeper. That's something that belongs to the human. It doesn't really belong to the other kingdoms. It's the human that needs to understand itself. And it wants to understand itself with more precision. It wants to understand itself because there's something that we are contributing in interpreting life. Yeah. So this is a very beautiful mechanism, model to receive an interpretation from the global consciousness and translate it into our particular consciousness. So you know, probably you've heard, you know, some people, they say that mathematics is the language of God, they say, huh? Okay, well, let's put it let's put it a bit more. It's true, but but I think in a deeper way than even the person that said it, because the person was still seeing it in calculations, in, you know, like the Fibonacci, and of course, yeah, you can see that there's this order that is expressed in nature that comes from just another level of a level of consciousness. And we're going to see, okay, it expresses, but it's not expressing only a measure or a measure of quantity. It's also expressing a sequence of consciousness. Yeah. And what we're going to see in the next module is kind of like, okay, well, why there's a difference between, you know, Europe and Africa and Asia, North America, South America, why there's a difference between the generations in time, like, do numbers express something about this? And that's what we're going to see. And I'll say yes, numbers do communicate something for us to understand why there is that difference between the different continents and different times, different generations, and etc. So, how are you guys? Some people are lying down. Probably the recommendation now would be become more vegetable now, you know, because now the human interprets it is like, okay, I've got that new probably. It's interesting. Now you're seeing it on Play Store, basically. Oh, it's interesting, that app. Now, do you want to download it? Download it. Literally, it's like that, huh? Okay, I'll download it. And then when you download it, do you want to use it? Do you want to learn how to use it? Literally, eh? There's something that is like that. It's like there's this decision of saying, okay, I like that app, I'm going to download it. Or I don't like that app. I don't need it now, you know, like, why do I need that app? Well, each person, each device is going to know which app to use or not. So
I have a question, David.
Yeah.
I have a question about the numbers and language. I noticed, well, at least I know she speaks Spanish, but Alejandra always uses the Spanish alphabet, and I'm not sure. So is Spanish supposed to be a special language, or is this working with any language, but you just need to adapt the alphabet?
Okay. Yeah. So the Spanish language, like each language has a function. So there's no such thing like a special or non-special, but it has a function. Yeah. Probably the three most extended functions in language are Chinese, English, and Spanish. But that doesn't mean like, it's just that it's the most extended. It doesn't mean anything else than that. It's the most extended. Now, each language has to be understood in itself, within itself. Because it's like each planet has to understand itself in itself, but then it relates with the others. You see, like, so the order of numbers of the alphabet establishes the quality of that letter, like a frequency quality of that letter. Now, it's different in English and it's different in Spanish. And like we are using Spanish and English, I don't think I'll be looking too much into it in this module, but probably I'll look a bit more. You see that other module, the other module of the structures of space-time is basically for those who are kind of seeing something interesting here. And with the next module, and it's to go deeper. It's like to look deeper into that. Yeah, and not everyone is all that interested. Others are fascinated. So that's why I made a clear distinction. This is like the basis, and then the other thing is more like to look deeper into it. So Spanish and English are very important languages, and Chinese also. But they have a different intrinsic order. Like, they all languages that belong to the earth, but they have their own design, meaning they have their own logic in them. So you have to understand English in English. But then when you understand English in English and Spanish in Spanish, there you can interconnect them. But you can't, because I was very much at the beginning like, how can I see this in English language? And I was trying to do it from the Spanish, and it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. It's like, it's kind of trying to, in the liver, trying to understand the lungs from the liver perspective. And no, it's not like that. It's like, you have to understand the liver from the liver, and the lung from the lung, and then in their own unique position, there we can have an interconnection. Yeah. So, for example, the Spanish has 27 letters and the English has 26. Okay, so that is a difference. There is a different sequence there. But so you can't, like, if you looking at an English word, I tend to look at the English alphabet to see that word. But then we can kind of mix it. But at the beginning, look, first, it's like a couple. It's like a couple. First, this happened to Mel from Spanish saying, yeah. First, like, for a couple to work, to interconnect themselves, a couple, they have to know they're different, like where you are, where I am. And when that is established, that the differentiation, okay, then they can link, and they can interconnect and exchange. But if they don't establish that differentiation, they confuse one area, they don't connect, they begin to interfere with each other. So yeah. For example, in your case, Laura, which you're going to have something similar to me, English and Spanish are going to be two very important languages in the vibration of your consciousness. See? And probably you've noticed, Laura, that because Laura also is in another course in Spanish, listening, it is the same logic that is communicating. It's the same level of, but the way that it's received in Spanish and the way that it's received in English, it's different. There's a different feel to it. Because it is going through a different kind of vibration, which is articulating in a specific way, in a specific frequency. So it's interesting because sometimes there are things that I can understand deeper when I'm speaking in English. And there are things I can understand deeper when I'm speaking in Spanish. And the understanding is not verbal, actually. It's just weird. Yeah. It's different. And
well, I have that I understand better when I listen to both, or first in Spanish and then English, or the other first in English then Spanish. Then somehow it just then it clicks. I need both language. I don't know. Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. There's a lot of things. Yeah.
I'm just going to say this happens to me with Sebastian. I find it really difficult, and I slow him down because he has to follow where I'm going, because I'm processing differently, I think, and it's like I'm receiving it, but I can't express it in the same way.
Okay, yeah. No, well, also think that Sebastian speaks in Spanish, but he is Argentinian at the same time, yeah? So there is something there that, because Argentina is a different continent. So there is something that is, you know, I lived in Europe for a long time, so I know how there's the mechanics that's going on there that you can kind of catch me better also. Well, but this is very interesting. This is hugely interesting to begin to see this thing of languages and the thing that, where was the language born? which country was that language born, and what is the telephone code of that language, and you begin to see things, and it just gives you such a wider picture that goes beyond the historical, cultural thing, which also, you know, that's an expression of it, but why does the culture express itself like that? There's a algorithm behind it, you know. So, and there are people that are going to have this dual translation, English, Spanish, and that Laura, sometimes I end up having a more complete, because when I'm explaining it, I'm understanding it, yeah, at the same time. So when I do it in Spanish and I do it in English, it's like they provide me different, like, two viewpoints, and I kind of see the elephant, you know, and from two angles, and it's like, ah, okay, I get it there. So yeah, now I have to learn Chinese, which is a bit more difficult. Okay, guys, let's leave it there. And the next module, we'll look into this, like, how is this expressed in the space-time sequence of planet Earth and of ourselves also, okay? And how we can begin to do a bit of a reading here out of this, yeah? So, thanks a lot, guys. Have a good Sunday. And we'll meet in the next month, okay? Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.